Hello everybody, how are we all? Paul79 here, I hope you're safe and well. Well, it's probably been about 12 hours since we last spoke. I need to get a more sort of regular schedule, you know. A bit like buses, nothing comes and then three come along at once. But anyway, I hope you're doing all right. Today we're going to talk about, so the last two videos, the car ones, I was focusing on how you build the rear of the car. I went into a lot of detail about the kit, how you fit it on, how you trim up the Boxster, etc. Oh, still hacking. Oh, a bit better today though. Hopefully in a couple of days that'll be gone. But then I suddenly thought, obviously the rear boot lid has not been in any of those videos because I've taken it off because it's just easier to see the other parts. But the actual rear boot lid, there's quite a lot of pieces and it's quite involved, or quite a lot of things go together to form that whole sort of section of the car. So I thought we should probably do a separate video on that, you know, including the big ironing board spoiler. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. It's all put together on my car, but it's not actually attached to the car. I'm not going to take it apart. And unfortunately, I don't really have any videos of like the specific sections on their own. However, you know me, I will try and go into as much detail and tell you as much as I can about how I do the various parts and sort of what order to do them in. So yeah, okay, I'll see you in a bit. Bye-bye. Right, okay, let's get stuck in. So here you can see the boot lid in place on the car with that huge ironing board spoiler. So what I suggest I do is go through sort of all the pieces that are involved in constructing this part of the car. So you have probably got, so what we got, 1, 2, 3, we'll call the brackets 2, that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are about 10 pieces that go into making this rear boot lid for these RS replicas. This part is the main part, right? And it is just, yeah, a fiberglass mold of the real boot. Underneath, and I'll show you when I take it off, there is pre-drilled holes for the boot hinges. At the side, there'll be pre-drilled holes and bolts to attach the spoiler brackets. You get all of this in your kit apart from this grille, which is what you have to make yourself, and I'll go into a bit more detail about that later. But yeah, in essence, this piece is the main piece, right? You know, you can put that on its own, and all the other bits you can fit while the boot lid is on the car. The first thing I'll talk about is this, what should we call this? The engine cover. So again, this is replicated in fiberglass. It's done very well. You know, you can see you've got the Porsche, let's do it here. You've got the Porsche logo here. This will all be sprayed matte black. And this section screws to the boot lid from underneath. There's predefined sort of holes, and it screws in to various parts on this. In fact, I think, can we see it? So basically underneath this is sort of semicircle sort of humps, right, where it enables you to screw through the boot lid into the underside of this. Now, this is where you fit your third brake light. So you can see here, so when you get this piece, right, all of these slats, you can see these gaps here, they'll be filled in. They'll just be filled in straight with fiberglass out of the mold. Now, you need to cut this one out, obviously, to fit your third brake light in. So that's one of the jobs, one of an easy jobs you can even do without having a Boxster donor to put the kit on, stuff like that. And you want to obviously have your third brake light, so you need to just get a normal 991 .1 911 brake light. That will fit perfectly in there. You'll just need to obviously cut that out. Use the back trimming method that I've talked about on other videos, where you just back trim the edges from the rear here, and then that whole sort of slither of fiberglass will pop out. These slats, right, again, they'll be just blanked off from behind. Now, you can leave them blanked off, Obviously on the real car there's grills in here, but if you decide to fit the grills, which is what I do, I recommend still, once the grill is in place and glued from behind, and I'll show you on my white car later on what I mean, when if you're going to fit the grills, you should probably still seal it off from the rear. And I use what is called flashing tape. You know, it's stuff that goes, it's like lead stuff that goes on the roof of the house. Yeah, see that strip where it meets the vertical wall? That's called flashing tape. I've probably got some here actually, maybe. Oh, it used to be, oh yeah, here it is. This is called flashing tape, right? And you sort of heat it up and it gets really sticky. I actually spray the other side black as opposed to leaving it silver. But I use that flashing tape on loads of parts of the car. I use it on the arch liners at the rear when I finally fit it up, etc, etc. The key is to just warm it first, and then the sort of the black sticky side gets really sticky. And you sort of, if you can imagine, you've got a grill there attached from the inside. I then blanket off from the rear with that flashing tape and it seals it. I also do that on the third brake light eye. Once the third brake light is in place, and I just sort of bond it in gently, I then wrap that tape around the rear of it. Why am I doing this? Why am I telling you this? Well, so the thing is you don't want to permanently glue this black section to the boot lid when you finally finish your car. The reason being is you might need to change the third brake light, yeah? So what happens is when your car's all painted and you're ready to fit this up, you do still just screw it. What you can do is on the underside of here, put a rubber seal, you know, just like a D rubber to stop water getting in. But inevitably water will get through here, which is a bit of a pain. So what you want is, if water does get in here, you want everything to sort of be sealed. So anything electronic like the third brake light. And then also, of course, if you're going to cut out these grills and put grills in, cut out these slats and put grills in, you don't want water getting in that way. So it's about minimizing the amount of water that can get in. Unfortunately, there is, the way this boot lid is bonded or molded, sorry, and I can't sort of show you because this is in the way. There is a gap on the other side of this inside which water will get in potentially as well, which is why, and again I'll show you on the white car, it's best to drill drain holes underneath. You basically want to drill drain holes in the boot here to allow water, if any water does get in underneath that, to drain out. It doesn't matter if water gets in there really, it's just a hollow piece of fiberglass, yeah? It's a fiberglass box effectively. So if water goes in, that's fine, it will drain out as long as you've cut those holes there. Okay, I'm going to stop now. So let's talk about the spoiler, right? So the spoiler is in three pieces, right? You've just got this massive piece of fiberglass. It's not solid, it's hollow. So you can imagine you've got a top bit and a bottom bit that bonds together. You can see it's been joined together here. You have these, let's call these the fins, right? These fins, if you can imagine this wasn't here, there'd be an open sort of hole like that. And these fins, you probably can't see it, but on the inside they're exactly like the real ones. They've got a protruding piece of fiberglass that's probably about that thick that slots in and goes into place. You can actually see, can you see, might be easier this way, you can see there is an indentation in that fin. So the idea is the spoiler sort of clips a bit inside the fin, right? The way you attach the fin, here you can see it clearer here, right? You see where my finger is, there's an indentation. Okay, it's not perfect, these are only sort of just screwed in place, but yeah, there'll be a couple of holes there that you drill out and basically you screw through the big spoiler into the little protruding lip that sits inside here, and that's how they attach. Now this one might be, yeah, this one's a bit more secure. The thing is they never come out perfect, but the idea is you know, you sort of work it out, pre-fit them how you're going to fit them, and then when you get them painted, you're not going to have it in place when it's painted, because this will typically be the body colour of the car and these will be black. So the idea is the body shop will clean all these pieces up separately, paint them, and then when I fit the car up, I not only do I screw them in place, but I will bond it on the inside where my finger is, top and bottom, and leave it to set, and then that'll be fine. You're never going to need to take them off unless you damage your spoiler. And if you damage the spoiler, well, then you're going to have to probably rip it apart anyway, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, you want them in place, secured for real when the time comes. So that's all that is, right? So that's the spoiler. Now, in the spoiler, again, you will have sunken in spaces for these brackets. Now, these brackets come with the kit. They're made of aluminium, not steel, so they're really light. Molded off a real one, and yeah, they effectively, you have basically 4 L-shaped brackets here. They're all slightly different shape, so you have to make sure you fit them the right way. The front ones are designed, they've got holes in, because the real car, you can design the spoiler to be horizontal or more like that. Everyone just fits it in this standard shape, which is the most horizontal. It's a bit of trial and error. At the end of the day, you can see how it works. Yeah, you've got the L brackets bolt into the spoiler, and then the other end of the L brackets bolt to the let's call it the spoiler mount. These big things here, right? And it sits in place just like that. What you'll find is the brackets that go into the spoiler will have 4 holes, but there'll only be 2 holes on each leg for the to screw into the spoiler. Okay, now on the real car, right, this metal bracketry is actually attached to the spoiler and all covered over, yeah, so you wouldn't actually see metal on the real car. It will just have this little bit pointing out. Doesn't really matter for these replicas, to be fair, because it's very rare you actually look at the underneath of that. Okay, be careful when you're fitting it up and screwing these into the spoiler, because there are preset bolts, nuts in there that you bolt it through, but you don't want to keep doing it and doing it too tight, because you might eventually disturb the nut that's bonded into the spoiler and it'll break off, and then you're sort of having to put a new one in, which will be quite difficult. Another thing to bear in mind is at this part of the spoiler, so where you bolt the back legs or the back brackets, this is very thin, right? So don't do what I did on the white car. I got the spoiler back, fitted it up, and I bolted in these rear ones. The bolt I used was far too long, or it was too long, and it actually came through the freshly painted spoiler, and I had a little bump here. So I had to take it back and get him to redo it. You obviously want to do what I did, although I wasn't clever enough at the time to remember, is you want to pre-fit it all up here, get the bolts that you're going to use in the final days ready, and remember them, which ones go where. Yeah, so the one that's closest to the back of the car has got to be the shortest, then that can be a little bit longer, and then all of these other ones can be quite long, because the gap here between top and bottom of the fiberglass is probably about 1 inch. All right, so that's just something to bear in mind. In terms of the actual bolts to use, because I'm just pre-fitted this up, I've used all sorts of Allen bolts here that I had knocking around just to get it in place. When I fit this up for real, I will probably use security Allen bolts. That's what I did on the white one, stop people nicking it. And I will obviously make sure that when the length of the bolt here, for example, doesn't stick out like that, and it's as flush as possible. And in fact, and I'll show you on the white one in a minute, I've actually put like black bolt caps on the top here as well to make it look a bit nicer and neater. All right, so you know, when you fit it up for real, you want to thread lock them in place, and it sort of holds itself together. I mean, it doesn't really wobble at all. It does It might wobble a bit when you're driving down the road, but that's because this whole boot is wobbling, not this bit, yeah? But it's very sturdy, yeah? I could literally do the ironing on that. Right, so I've taken the whole boot lid off just to show you some further bits, right? So the spoiler legs, right, they will have pre-drilled holes that again bolt into nuts that have been sunken into the side parts of the fiberglass boot. Now, chances are they won't line up perfectly, okay? I actually had to muck about with one because it wasn't in the right position, and in the end I actually drilled a hole in the bottom of the boot and actually bolted it with my own nut from the inside. But again, it's one of those things you don't want to be having to worry about that when the car is freshly painted. So yeah, pre-fitting it up, it is a must. But that's it really for the spoiler. You may need to sort of bend these legs slightly to get them to fit the curve of the boot. This one is not perfect by any means. Hopefully my body shop can sort of make that look a little bit better when it goes in for painting. So what I've done now is I've turned the whole boot lid section upside down just so you can see things a little clearer. So you can see here you've got two screws there that help attach the fins to the spoiler. So this is now the underside of the boot lid, okay? So what we have here is like all of this black you see, this is that boot lid, the main part of it that is beige on the top. You can see this little lip here, that's the engine cover we call it, where we mount the third brake light, and you can see how that attaches to the main boot shell. You can see these screws here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they're attaching this plate to it, yeah, from the underside. So if I undid that screw, you'd see that there's fiberglass from the engine cover where the third brake light is that screws into, okay? Now I was talking about these bolt holes for these spoiler legs. You can see here I had to drill a hole because it just wouldn't line up. So what I've done is I've drilled a hole and actually bolted it through and put a nut in to get it in place because it just didn't fit. And again, I had to do one in this corner, so I've drilled a big hole in the boot lid and then put a plastic bung there. Really doesn't matter, that's going to be fine. What else? Okay, so on the boot lid there'll be preset bolts, nuts that you actually bolt the engine hinges to. So you, just open that up. So the hinges you need are just standard 991 rear boot hinges. They have space for adjustment up and down, left and right. You might need to make these holes a little bit bigger, and also there is adjustment here with this little screw that comes in the comes with the hinge to make it sit high or lower when you shut it. This section here, this is where it actually bolts to the car, like that, on that metal bracket. If I just show you, so those bits I just showed you, you have these holes here, that's where the hinges go, and then the boot lid lifts up like that. Again, you might need to make these bigger slightly, give yourself as much adjustment as you can, yeah? And it's literally just 4 bolts that bolt the whole boot lid to the car. Let's talk about these gas rams as well. So don't waste your time getting real Porsche gas rams, right? Because they're just simply not strong enough, okay? The thing is you can't have the gas ram when it's fully extended too long, because what will happen is when the boot opens up, it will hit the window. You don't want that. So it's been a few years of trial and error to get the right gas rams, and even then I still couldn't get perfect ones. So you need something like 400 newtons of pushing power, which is what these are. And these particular gas rams, they come off a Fiat Punto. However, they're still not long enough, yeah? It's been a bit of a nightmare, but I've had an ingenious idea where Because these gas rams come, you can actually unscrew the top, right? And I've extended it ever so slightly by using a thread extender. So basically you have a thread on the gas ram that screws into this nut that's also then got another thread, and then the head goes on here, right? So what that's effectively done is made the throw of the gas ram a centimetre longer, right? And that's just perfect. I've looked everywhere to try and get gas rams the right length from the start. The only ones I can find are just not strong enough, okay? So, and I'll show you on the white car what I've done as well. But yeah, there you go. You want something that's 400 newtons in power. Otherwise, this boot lid, what with the spoiler as well, is just simply too heavy for the standard Porsche ones, right? You got to remember, I guess, on the real car, all of this is made of carbon fibre, not fiberglass, so it's a lot lighter anyway, okay? What else do we need to talk about? On the boot lid inside, there'd be more pre-drilled bolts here, one here and one here. What are they for? They are for bump stops. So the idea is when you shut your boot, you want to have something with a thread and then a little bump. And the idea is when the boot's closed and locked in place, this pushes down on our metal plate that's on the rear of the car to form a tight sort of seal, a fit. Because the only way the actual boot locks in place is using the boot lock catch, the boot catch here. Again, there's predefined, pre-drilled holes there with bolts. You just bolt that in. You can even use the stand. So this is from the Boxster. You use the same thing. You just attach that to the boot, and that's how it locks. So it uses the same mechanism. But when that locks in place, you want the boot to have slightly bit of pressure down when it clicks in place, and you can get that by putting these bump stops on. Again, I'll show you on the white car what I mean. So here's just another better view of how those L-shaped brackets sort of sit into the actual spoiler. You might need to widen this out to make it sit flusher. It's never going to be perfect, I'm afraid, but again, because it's on the underside, you really can't see it. The body shop will neaten all of that up and make it all smooth, and again, I'll show you on the white one what they look like. But yeah, I've just used some bolts for now to make sure that that all works as intended. Now the last bit of the boot is this section here, right? It comprises of three pieces. You've got this flat piece, yeah, which again is molded off a real one. I'm sure on the real car these sunken holes are cut out. Then it's got this other piece that's basically the shape of this grille. You can see here it's got these protruding pieces of fiberglass here. That is a separate section. And then what you need to do yourself though is actually make a grille like I've done, that basically, so this is part number one, and let's call the other part number two. You need to make this grille, right, that wraps round part number two, and then part number one, which is just a flat plate, attaches to part number two, but you squash the grille in between. So I'm not going to take it off, but you can probably see, so I've got my grille and it's wrapped around the underside, or the bottom of part number two, and then part number one, this flat plate, goes on top and squashes it together. And then the grille that goes along the same grille also wraps around the bottom of part number two and then gets squashed between the boot lid, this bit, and this section, yeah, and it just houses it in place purely for decoration only. If I took all of this out, you'd just have a sort of a concaved gap in the boot, and that is just, again, screwed to the main boot lid. So if we look at these screws here, so these three at the front, that's attaching part number one to part number two with the grill in place as well, right? So it's just those three, and then all of these other screws that are along the sort of further edge, that is attaching the whole unit, parts one and two, to the boot lid. Okay, you can see here this needs a bit of work. This boot lid will need a bit of filler there to make that good. likewise. You see here what we have is that's how the boot lid should look. This particular one's been damaged, so that needs to be filled in a bit there. But then also part number one needs a lot of trial and error trimming to make it fit. It needs a lot of thinning down to create, say, a right angle on the inside of this right angle bit, so your grille fits in. Otherwise what will happen is your grille, you'll find you'll have a gap here because the thing just won't go in enough. It's quite a lot of work, but it's worth it. And again, my body shop are going to need to, I might even need to get a new one of these because this is cracked. I don't know yet. But yeah, the thing is trying to get these are all moulded off real parts, but actually trying to get them brand new from Porsche, quite a lot of money. It's probably not worth it. So yeah, so that's sort of like the final part of the whole boot lid. So I put it back in place, right? Now I've just put this in place, the hinges aren't attached, and you can see it is a very sort of tight, snug fit, yeah? So the thing is obviously it's going to take a bit of work to align it right with the actual hinges bolted to the car, and that's going to be one of the jobs that I do eventually. Obviously it's never going to be, you can't have it you can't have it as flush like I've got at the moment because it won't open. And you can see here just the way I've put it on, you've got the edge of the car here protruding on both sides. The idea is it probably wants to come back and sort of try and have it line up with the edge of the car. This is all still quite tight, but then there's a gap there. Again, this is something for the body shop to really fine tune. You can see now my gap here is too big, so it's going to be a lot of work for me to sort of get it as best I can to make it sort of fit properly. But you know, you're at the sort of mercy of so many things. You're at the mercy of the rear quarters, you're at mercy at how the bumper's been fitted, so there's a lot that goes into it. You know, the idea is you want to have this corner meeting the top there, sort of following the line round where the light is. I haven't got this one in here, but again, my body shop's going to need to fix that because I dented it like a Wally. That's why they love me so much, not. But yeah, I mean, you can see, you get the effect. And even then, on the white one, it's not perfect. The gaps aren't brilliant. Well, no, the gaps are pretty good, but they're never going to be like a real car. But yeah, in essence, it does what it's intended to do. So yeah, obviously before I forget, obviously when you're doing the rear quarter, you know, the bumper and the two quarter panels, when you're putting that on, don't completely forget about the boot lid, because obviously it's important, because you have to make sure your glass fits, but then also when you're doing all of this here, obviously you want to make sure that the boot fits as well. You know, so you don't have to have all the spoiler and all this stuff on, just the boot lid, yeah, for ease of use, because like I said, all the other bits you can work on and attach afterwards. But yeah, don't forget about the boot lid when you're fitting up the main kit. Ultimately you want to try and line up this crease with that crease there, this crease with that crease there. Just bear in mind you never get it perfect, so don't get too upset with it. But yeah, I just wanted to let you know that. So in true Blue Peter style, here's one I prepared earlier, probably about 4 years earlier. But yeah, let's go through it. Okay, so you can see here on the fins, yeah, again I've got two screws here, black screws. It's actually bonded in place as well. Here you can see how the L brackets fit in. You can see I've got my special security Allen bolts there. I was talking about, and again I've got them on all of these bolts as well. Here I was talking about, I put a little cap to neaten it up over the actual nut, so that all looks pretty nice. Again, you can't really see it when the boot's down. What else? Okay, so here you can see the boot catch. Here is parts number 1 and 2 I was talking about. So you can see here, this is part number 1, part number 2 is behind it. the finish on the piece of part number 2 is never great. So the idea is instead of trying to make it look like the car body, you know, nice and smooth, you're probably best to just stone guard it or stone chip it or whatever it is, so the actual paint is rough, because you'll never get it right. But you can see here how that grille is wrapped over the top of part number 2, and the bottom of it is just sandwiched together with part number 1. You know, I was talking about those bump stops. Here's a bump stop that I've got in place, so when that closes down it rests on the metal here. I've got another bump stop there as well. Here you can see, hopefully, might be a bit dark, but yeah, you can see I've got my gas rams in here again with the modified extra length bit of nut extender to make them higher. The boot does actually open further, right? It opens up that much, and the gas rams are actually holding it up. But what I do as a precaution, I've got one of these door sort of stops as well that I put in. When I'm having the boot open for a long period, I let it rest on that as opposed to using the gas rams, because any sort of big gust of wind and the gas rams will probably give way. So that's just a safety sort of precaution there. So, but yeah, that's how high the boot opens. Yeah. Oh, I thought the wind was going then. But that's how high it opens. These are the these little bolts. Hang on. You going out? Oh. See that, Rams? You're going to be on the video. Right, where was I? Yeah, I was talking about, you see this little bolt here? You can make that go in and out, and what that will do is when the hinge shuts down, it will rest on that metal there to sort of basically adjust how much the hinge closes. So again, that's another bit of adjustment that you can make to make the boot shut as best you can. Again, when you finally fit it up for real, you want to put in sort of rubber trims there, you know, to keep the water from going in. I've got a rubber trim down the bottom here as well. Made these plates to cover up the light fittings. And yeah, here you can see, here's the original box to boot latch, and then that's the original box to boot catch. I might do a separate video on that when I actually fit mine up on the other car. But yeah, it's all sort of standard. I've just made a plate to sort of hide the gap there. So yeah, all good. So there you go. Quite a lot involved in the old boot lids, quite a lot of parts, but nothing is particularly difficult. I'd say the biggest part is the trial and error of doing parts number 1 and 2 in that grille. I had to make quite a few grills when I did it. And the thing with that grille, and I should have said, to be fair, you don't want to use mesh that's got really tiny holes, because if you think about it, you're trying to make a grille and wrap the top and the bottom round apart. The bigger the sort of mesh, the hole, the easier it is to bend that round top and bottom. If you try and use a really tiny mesh, there's obviously more metal there, so it's harder to bend it. Do you get what I mean? Anyway, if you've got any questions, just let me know as usual. Send me a message on Instagram or leave a comment. But yeah, so I think that's about it. I'm getting excited now because all of the stuff I've been doing and looking at the pieces and then looking at the white car, it's given me the buzz to get back on this one. Now the weather has got glorious sunshine out there. Got no excuses really, have I? So, so there you go. Anyway, I will see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.